last. Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Ah, at last. For the Lich King. I'm sure you suffer. This is more like it. No one orders me around. Finally. Ah, at last. Finally. Your pain shall be legendary. This is more like it. You will be endless. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? No one orders me around. Tread lightly.
We're under attack!
Finally. Ah, at last. Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. Ah, at last. Finally. For the Lich King. This is your pain. Finally. Ah, at last. What is it now? Finally. Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. Ah, at last. Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. This is more like it. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? Ah, at last.
Our allied town is being attacked!
Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. Ah, at last. This is more like it.
Point the way.
What is it now? Tread lightly. Finally. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. This is more like it. Finally.
Point the way.
What is it now? Ah, at last. Faithless coward. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne
Point the way.
hungers.
Point the way.
Speak, fool. What is it now? Speak, fool. Finally. Now, Frostmourne.
We're under
What is
attack!
it? This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Ah, at last. Frostmourne hungers.
Our hero has been slain!
No one orders me around. Ah, at last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. What is it now? Tread lightly. What is it now? Ah, at last. This is more like it. Ah, at last. Speak, fool, for the Lich King. Oh, for the Lich King. Oh my God. Finally. Your pain shall be legendary.
Our allied town is being attacked!
I'll make sure you suffer. Ah, at last. No one orders me around. Tread lightly. What is it now? Speak, fool. What is it now?
Hello there!
Speak, fool. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. Ah, at last. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? Finally. Tread lightly. Ah, at last. No one orders me around. This is more like it. Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Tread lightly. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Finally. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Speak, fool. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. Tread lightly. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Finally. At last.
Our hero has been slain. We're under attack!
No one orders me around. Finally.
Point the way.
What is it now? No one orders me around. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? Speak, fool. This is more like it. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. Tread lightly. At last. Speak, fool. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Finally. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Faithless coward. You will know endless torture. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers.
Our allied town is being attacked!
Tread lightly. What is it now? At last. Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers.
Our allied
This is
hero
more
has
like
been
it.
slain!
Finally. At last. This is more like it. Finally. Faithless coward. No one orders me around. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally.
Our allied town is being
Frostmourne
attacked!
hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Finally.
Our allied town is being attacked! We're under attack!
Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. What is it now? Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. For the Lich King. Now, Frostmourne. This make
Our
sure.
allies' hero has been slain.
Speak, fool. At last. Faithless coward. Tread lightly. Fine. No one orders me around. Frostborn hunger. At last. Finally. At last. At last. This is more like it.
Point the way. Point the
What
way.
is it now? Speak, fool.
Our allied town is being attacked.
No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally.
Our allied town is being attacked.
Tread lightly. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. At last. This is more like it.
Our
Frostmourne
allied town is
hungers.
being attacked.
At last. What is it now? This is more like it. Finally. At last. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Speak, fool. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? Tread lightly. Speak, fool. At last. This is more
Our
like it.
allied hero has been slain.
Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. What is it now? At last. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Finally. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers.
We're under attack.
I'll make sure you suffer. Faithless coward. You will know endless. Faithless coward. You will know endless. For the Lich King. Speak, fool. I'll make sure you suffer. This is more like it. For the Lich King. I'll make sure you suffer. At last. What is it now? Tread lightly. Speak, fool. Frostmourne hungers.
Our allied hero has
What
been
is it
slain.
now? At last. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. What is it? For the Lich King. Your pain shall be legendary. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Tread lightly.
Our allied town is being attacked. Our hero has been slain. We're under attack.
What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Tread lightly. last. Frostmourne hungers.
Point the way.
No one orders me around. Speak, fool. At last. Tread lightly. This is one. At last. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? At last. Tread lightly. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Finally. At last. Finally.
Your name. Our allied town is being attacked.
At last. Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. What is it now? At last. Faithless coward. This is more like it. Tread lightly. No one orders me around. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Tread lightly. At last. What is it now? This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Tread lightly. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. At last. This is more like it.
Our hero has been slain. We're under attack! Our allied town is being attacked!
No one orders me around. Tread lightly. At last. No one. Speak, fool. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. No one orders me around. At last. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last.
Our allied town is being attacked!
At last. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Now, Frostmourne. Finally. This is
Our
more
allied
like
town
it.
is being attacked!
At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it.
Our allies' hero has been slain!
Speak, fool. No one orders me
Our
around.
allied town is being attacked!
Tread lightly. Speak, fool. Tread lightly. Speak, fool. Finally. This is more like it.
Our allied town
Tread
is
lightly.
being attacked!
At last. Finally. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. Tread lightly. This is more like it. At last. Finally. At last. Finally. At last. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is
Greetings,
more
friend.
like it.
We're under attack!
Tread lightly. What is it now? At last. Tread lightly. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. What is it now? Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. Tread lightly. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers.
Our allied
Tread
town is
lightly.
being attacked!
At last. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Finally. At last. This is more like it. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne
Our
hungers.
allied town is being attacked!
What is it now?
Point the way.
Tread lightly. What is it now? No one orders me around. This is more like it. Speak. What is it now? Finally. Your pain shall be legendary. Frostmourne hunger. This is more like it. Endless combat. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. For the Lich King. At last. Speak, fool. This is more like it. At last. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. No one orders me around. This is more like it. Finally.
Our allies' hero has been slain!
Speak, fool. At last. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Speak, fool. Finally. This
We're
is
under
more like
attack! Our allied town is
Finally.
being attacked!
This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Tread lightly. This is more like it. At last.
Our
Frostmourne
allied town is
hungers.
being attacked!
Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally.
Our hero has been slain!
Tread lightly. At last. This is more like it. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. At last.
You will know endless torment.
Finally. At last. No one orders me around.
Point the way.
What is it
Inventory
now?
is full.
Point the way.
Tread lightly. This is more like it. At last.
Our
This is more
allies' hero
like
has
it.
been slain.
Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. Speak, fool. At last. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Tread lightly. This is more like it. For the Lich King. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. No one orders me around. Speak, fool. Frostmourne hungers. At last. No one orders me around. Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. Finally.
Our allied town
Frostmourne
is being attacked.
This is more like it. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Speak, fool. At last. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. What is it?
Our allied town is being attacked.
No one orders me. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally.
Our allied town is being attacked.
At last. Speak. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne
Our
hungers.
allied town is being attacked. Our hero has been slain. Our allied town is being attacked. Our allied town is being attacked.
Tread lightly. This is more like it. Finally. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Finally. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At lightly. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more fine. This is Frostmourne hungers. Fine. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Finally. At last. This is more like it. At last. This is more like it. Finally.
We're under
This is more
attack!
like it. Tread lightly. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Finally. At last.
Our allied town is being attacked!
Speak, fool. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Speak, fool. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. What is my end? Now, Frostmourne. Your Your pain shall be legendary.
Our allies' hero has been slain.
At last, Frostmourne hungers. Finally. No one orders me around. This is more like it. Finally.
Our allies' hero has been slain.
At last. Speak, fool. Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around.